Okay, welcome everybody. Good to see you. Thanks for coming. And obviously also a warm welcome to our guest speaker today, Rozita. I'll do a quick introduction and then hand it over to her to talk, and then we'll have plenty of time hopefully for Q&A at the end as well. So Rozita is the head of solutions mapping at the UNDP's Accelerator Lab in India. She works to accelerate and embed innovations impacting the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly around air pollution, climate resiliency, and the circular economy. Prior to working at UNDP, Rozita was a circular economy project manager at Philips within their global sustainability office. And although she was originally trained in journalism, she also has an MA in sustainable development practices and an MSc in urban management and development. And Rozita is also one of our Terra.do mentors, and you'll be getting more information about the mentorship scheme in the coming weeks. So just to say thanks again, Rozita, for coming, and over to you.
Thanks so much, Liam. Just gonna share my screen now. And let me know when you can see that.
And this time it is showing us your notes.
Okay, just a second.
So different to when we tested it a moment ago.
Yeah. I'll just start that. Yeah, is that okay now?
That looks great, yeah.
Okay, awesome then. I'll start, and then I won't be able to see the chat. So if there is something, if I'm going too fast or is there anything, you can just pause me. I will first take you through this session, and then I want to keep a lot of time also for interacting with you all and listening to your questions, and also getting to know more about your experience in this topic and your thoughts as well. Good evening, everyone from India. I'm Rozita, as Liam mentioned. I'm very happy to be associated with Terra.do since 1 year now, and happy to be back with this masterclass on circular economy. This is a very important topic, and what I want to do right now today with you is to really take you in a little bit more rapid and a condensed way to really cover a number of concepts, topics, but most importantly, case studies and real life, examples of how circular economy is present in our world. And don't worry about the slides and information. Everything will be shared with you after the session. There's also some reading material that I have for you, or extra reading resources for those who want to take a deeper dive in this topic. Needless to say, 1 hour is very limited to talk about this topic, but let's make a start. So today what we'll be doing is, we'll be really looking at where is the origin of circular economy? How did it really begin? What are the strategies and principles that really define this philosophy or ambition? How can we see it in practice? So what are some of the case studies or exciting examples, even of innovations in this domain? Then we want to kind of end it with reflecting on the challenges, but also some of the opportunities as well. So without further ado, just to begin with saying, always important to kind of look at the history of where a topic began from. So circular economy interestingly draws from multiple disciplines. Walter Stahl is the one who's credited with, actually terming the coin cradle to cradle. Some of you might have heard about it in the late 1970s. And he was working on developing a closed loop approach to production processes. And he also created the Product Life Institute in Geneva. What happened later was, German chemist Michael Bronckart and American architect Bill McDonough, they came up and they developed the cradle-to-cradle concept and the certification process. There's also a book by the same title by these authors, which is highly recommended for anybody who's beginning to understand this field. And later, what we also saw, very interesting fields of industrial ecology coming in, biomimicry coming in. Now, biomimicry basically holds that, we can find solutions to human challenges by emulating nature's patterns and strategies. So it's a very interesting field. Parallelly, if we speak about regenerative economy or regenerative design in the US, John T. Lyell, he started developing ideas on regenerative design beyond agriculture, because agriculture, this concept was existing. And he really laid the foundation of the circular economy framework. And today there is also a Lyle Center for Regenerative Studies that offers interesting courses on this subject. Now, moving to the topic for today and discussing about circular economy, why are we even discussing about it, right? So the reason we are discussing is that early in 2021, there was this interesting report, Circularity Gap Report, by this organization called Circle Economy. And it says that our world is only 8.6% circular, and the trend is going down. And what has happened over the past decades is that humanity has reached two milestones. One, that the world is consuming 100 billion tons of material. You need to hear that again, 100 billion tons of material. And the planet is 1 degree warmer. So what happens is, of course, with this gloomy picture, there's always a silver lining, there's an opportunity. So this report really says and brings the interconnection between climate change mitigation and circular economy. It really observes that, the material handling and use activities, which we typically call consumption and production activities, these account for 70% of greenhouse gas emissions. So the argument here is that by applying these circular strategies and principles, you can not only cut excessive consumption, but you can also slash emissions. So this was an interesting revelation. And then coming to what is the circular economy, how do you define it? This simplified diagram just says it all. So circular economy is an alternative to the linear take, make, waste model that we have been following since several decades now. And the idea is three things. It designs out waste and pollution. It keeps products and materials in use, and it regenerates natural systems. So we mean that resources are not then consumed and discarded, but the value is retained by adopting various strategies like reusing, repairing, remanufacturing, refurbishing, and recycling. So to take you further, it's very important to know about this diagram and be familiar with this diagram. This is the famous butterfly diagram produced by Ellen MacArthur Foundation a decade back to really explain this concept. If you look closely, this diagram is basically divided into two halves. So if you see on your left side, the green loops are what we call the biological materials. On the right side is the blue loop, which is the technical material. And what does it mean? So biological materials are those materials that can safely re-enter the natural world once they have gone through the one or more use cycles. So they can biodegrade over time, they can return the embedded nutrients to the environment. On the right side, on the other hand, are the technical materials. So these are the materials that are metals, plastics, synthetic chemicals. These must continuously cycle through the system so that their value can be captured and recaptured. There is one particular subtlety about this diagram, which is the distinction between consumers and users. So what I mean to say here is that in a circular economy, the biological materials are the only ones that we can really call consumable, while technical materials are used. So it makes no sense that we say that we are consuming our washing machine and car in the same way that we say consuming food. And this is subtle, but this is very important to understand because this defines how we view our relationship to materials. So it raises the question, about the necessity of owning the products the way that we traditionally do. So what is the benefit of, owning a drill, just to drill holes in your wall, to hang a painting, when it is the access to the service that you're seeking and not to the product itself? Often at times we purchase products or goods that we use maybe once or twice in the lifetime before they are discarded. This does happen. Whereas what we are looking for is the service that that product is really defining. And we will be looking at some examples to make this more clear. Now, just to make a little bit more, easier to understand some of the strategies and some of the very commonly used terms, we look at the inner loops and the terms like maintain and prolong. So this philosophy or innermost loop of the technical cycle means that this is a strategy of really keeping the products and materials in use by prolonging their lifespan for as long as possible. So we are really designing for durability here. And these longer lasting products can also be shared amongst various users. Second loop is more about reusing and redistributing. This means that the technical products and materials can be reused multiple times and they can be redistributed to new users in their original form. So this is like marketplace such as eBay. You have second-hand markets these days. These are good examples of it. Third important loop that some of our manufacturing industry has started incorporating is refurbishing or remanufacturing. So remanufacturing, in a very rough sense, it means that the product is disassembled to the component level and rebuilt. So often there is parts harvesting, there is replacing of components. Whereas refurbishment is largely a cosmetic process where a product is repaired as much as possible, usually without the disassembly, and there is some limited replacement of components. Recycle, I think everybody is familiar with this one. This seems to be the most popular one. This is the process of reducing a product all the way back to its basic material level. However, even though it's an important part of the system, it is not the most efficient one because there is the loss of embedded labor and energy. So we need to see, and for each product and each material, it may look different. It might be the case that sometimes recycling is more costly or it is a wasteful process. And therefore, we must look at the inner loop. So first, starting with, we need to look at reducing stuff. Otherwise, we need to look at really expanding the lifespan. So this is the maintaining and prolonging aspect. Other than that, we need to look at reusing or redistributing, having several users for one product. So these are the rental and lease kind of agreements that we look at. And then the fourth one is more about how can we really change the industry itself that is producing these goods by making them and making their R&D and functions in such a way that they're able to refurbish or take back goods and make them as good as new. And we'll be looking at examples for all of these. Now, just to also mention, why we are in this state today, this goes back to Industrial Revolution. So Industrial Revolution did raise the living standards for many people around the world. We were looking at mass production and consumption activities, rise in employment, rise in daily wages, standard of living. However, the downsides included increased waste and pressure on finite resources. Now, the whole premise of circular economy is what if waste and pollution were never created in the first place? And this is possible by applying certain principles, but this is also a very, very different and often difficult mindset change. Loop that we are stuck in is that we want new products and, to keep up with technology, products get obsolete very soon. Best example is our mobile phone that we keep replacing very often. Perhaps products should have a defined use period and longer lasting products could work. But the paradox here is that there is often the danger that there will be drop in consumption. There will be it will result in drop in spending in the economy. It will affect our job and ultimately standards of living. So if we are not able to sell more, then all these things will suffer. So these are some of the realities we also have to live with whenever we are thinking of applying circular economy. And these are some of the kind of barriers that some stakeholders might even say to you when you go to them with circular economy strategies. There are some videos here. I will not be playing them right now, but when you receive the case study deck and slide deck, you will be able to see. So these are very interesting videos that basically delve a little bit more deeper into some more terms like performance economy. This video particularly ponders about the speed at which we are using the materials and what are the number of years that are left for valuable materials and how can we enhance the efficiency. There is also an interesting video on resource abundance by design that also helps us better understand the concept. Now coming to really the application part. So some of you might be wondering, where do we see the applications of circular economy, which industry specifically? To be honest, there are a number of examples and multiple industries that are applying circular economy already. It started with the textile industry, the textile sector. We are also talking about now the manufacturing sector coming in, including the FMCGs and the consumer goods. Interestingly, even city planning and urban planning initiatives have started incorporating the principles of circular economy. building and construction sector, and a lot of people are now talking about the food waste, and the food and beverage industry is also getting involved. I mentioned about city planning and urban planning and how it applies circular economy. Very important to mention about this. This is the donut model of circular economy. Some of you might have heard about it. This is proposed by Kate Trafford. And the whole idea here is that since cities account for 85% of global GDP generation, but also 60 to 80% of greenhouse gas emissions, these are our opportunity spots for enabling circular economy. However, of course, there are always challenges. So how do you come up with strategies? So this donut economy model really helps in providing the city government with the framework to develop a strategy to really realize this vision. And it is based on 9 environmental ceilings and 12 social foundations. The environmental ceilings are basically the planetary boundaries beyond which unacceptable environmental degradation occurs. So examples are climate change, air pollution, biodiversity loss. In addition to this, there are the 12 social foundations. These are education, health, gender equality. So like a donut has a sweet spot, this framework also has a sweet spot. So because when you use this principle, the city is basically calculating the current impact of the city on both these environmental and social parameters. And to be in a safe space, they need to find the sweet spot, which is environmentally safe and socially just space. And due to the pandemic, we also saw a lot of announcements coming in, specifically cities really recognizing the interconnection between not only environmental factors, but also social factors. This link, which you'll be able to access later, takes you to a page where you'll be able to see what kind of city level plans and targets are coming, who are the pioneering cities around the world who are actually developing very interesting targets based on circular economy and using this model. Now moving to another important topic, which is a question often asked: is circular economy profitable? Fine, it's good for the environment, but how do I care about it if I'm from the private sector, corporate sector, and if I have to earn in this economy? So yes, the answer is yes, circular economy is profitable. There are various drivers and business models. We will return back and revisit this slide after I show you some examples. So I present to you now, just to simplify, 5 categories of business models that enable circular economy. And this will help you in envisioning a bit on how this really plays out actively in the business sector. So the first one is called performance model. As the name suggests, the responsibility actually is with the provider. The user is only interested in the performance of the service and the quality of the service, not in the product providing it, and they don't need to buy the product for it. The provider is giving them the machinery and the products are deployed. An example of this is circular lighting, which was introduced by Philips. So Philips basically sells the lumens to turn to, and instead of selling the light fittings, and then Philips pays the electricity bill, right? Which means that they have an incentive to make the lights as efficient as possible. And the user is only paying a fee based on how many lumens they are using. So there are very interesting service models that are given. And based on that, the consumer can opt for a pay-per-service model. Second model is an access model. This is also similar to the first one. This is, how the money is being made is that the money is being made by providing access to the product, and this can be widely geographically distributed. Ownership remains with the access provider. So think about bike sharing models anywhere across the world where you can just come in, jump in, take the bike, return it anywhere, and you are not owning it, you are not maintaining it, you're only using it for your ride. And these days, there are also examples of car service and hop-on, hop-off service that have started coming up using the same model. The third one is an interesting one, which is the gap exploiter model, which means that it feeds into the value gaps in the existing system. So for instance, think about, manufacturers of large machines, right? And we know that there are these repair shops, there are these parts, extra parts material that is there, and consumers often buy a product from one manufacturer, but they might choose to repair elsewhere or use the services of other vendors. Here, what happens is that the manufacturer actually gets into refurbishing the old machines, Example again coming from Philips is the MRI machines, which they are now taking back. They have the control over the parts because they are the manufacturer, so they know how to efficiently really work around the system. They are giving these repair and service models, and these are giving employments to the recyclers and vendors or upcyclers. And there is an end-to-end kind of a subscription service, but new kind of offering that is being given to the consumers, in this case being hospitals, who don't have to really buy the new machine, but they can buy something that is as good as new at a little bit more lesser cost. The fourth example is hybrid model. This is an interesting one. In this, the profit from the repeat sales of the relatively cheap or part products with a short lifespan comes into place. So on your screen, you'll see a printer and you'll immediately understand what I'm trying to say here. This is the HP printer. And what they started doing in 2005 was they started recovering the PET, which is the polyethylene terephthalate, from its ink cartridges. And what happened then, this became the material source for the new ink cartridges. So through this program, the returned ink cartridges were basically disassembled, separated into metals, plastics, and other materials. The plastic part was then processed and mixed with plastics from other sources like bottles, plastic hangers, and then the new body of the cartridge was created in this way. In a decade's time, so by 2016, HP had manufactured over 3 billion HP ink and toner cartridges using more than 177 million pounds of recycled content. So as a result, what we saw was that 682 million cartridges, 50 million apparel hangers, and 3.3 billion post-consumer plastic bottles were kept out of the landfills just by this whole recovery, taking back, upcycling of these materials process. So this was quite an interesting, industry move by a big player like HP back in 2005, which was very inspiring for a lot of other smaller and bigger organizations. Fifth example is the classic long life model, which is basically a high quality product with a long lifespan, which all of us need and want, which used to be there in our parents' and grandparents' generation. And the value for money factor comes in here. And of course, we need more manufacturers here. We've all been hearing about fast fashion, about how your t-shirt should actually be costing more than your coffee. So why aren't we having those high quality products and goods back to our market which have longer longevity, but also quality? So this is something that is a classic long life model that all of us need to do. Now, revisiting the slide about, is CE profitable, and looking at some of the drivers, there are many benefits that circular economy brings into the business. Now, there is a lot of, commodity supply uncertainty and price volatility linked in today's world. So what happens is, when you're shifting from selling products to services, it enables the manufacturers to control the reuse or recycled components, and they can produce goods as corporate assets. It also reduces manufacturing costs. An example of this is that, remanufacturing car parts is 30 to 50% less expensive than producing the new parts. And we have an example from Renault, which I'll touch upon later. There are also new revenue streams that come in. So the example which I was mentioning earlier about refurbishing MRI machines, that was not happening 5 years back. That is just something that came within the span of the past 5 years. Earlier, the only income or revenue stream was selling new MRI machines. Now there are two revenue streams. One, selling new MRI machines, there are still enough takers. But the second one, slightly discounted and reaching other markets which probably could not afford a new MRI machine. They're now buying the refurbishing machine and they're still paying for it. And this is a new revenue stream that did not exist in the company. Another interesting example is companies sometimes are not able to reuse or recycle their own goods or parts. They can offer this to other companies. So we call it like the upstream and the downstream industry movement. And this also creates new circular relationships. And this is also gaining traction because somebody's waste is somebody's resource, and there are enough buyers and enough sales that can take place between two industries. Of course, this also leads to new business opportunities and new markets. The whole repairability culture is coming back. There are now organizations that are trying to see how they can capitalize on this while offering this repairability culture to their consumers. We'll be discussing about this as well in a bit. Of course, job creation, needless to say, the impact on employment is, largely fueled by, really spending on these high quality, labor intensive recycling activities. There are higher skilled jobs in remanufacturing. There are new kind of jobs that are created across these small and medium enterprises. And there are these new kind of players that get into the market. We are also seeing a lot of entrepreneurship models coming in this field. And of course, for customers, it means greater utility of all products. Now, speaking about some innovations and some examples of how how producers are really offering their goods and services to the consumers in the new age. So one example is Fairphone. Some of you might have heard about it. So this is the principle of improving repairability. Fairphone basically offers consumers the ability to purchase the spare parts. You can actually rip apart your own phone and you can repair it on your own by just buying the part that needs to be replaced instead of buying a whole new phone. There is a company called Mud Jeans in UK where consumers can buy, their pair of jeans, but they can also bring back an old jeans and get a discount. And what happens is that the return jeans or the old jeans are then processed into new products like sweaters and hats. Similarly, from another industry, the carpet manufacturing industry, there is Deso, the Dutch carpet manufacturer. What they have done is they have completely redesigned their carpet tiles. So they can be actually disassembled and the yarn can be reprocessed into new products. So they keep on rotating these materials without having the need to extract virgin materials each time. The fourth example is Splosh soap. So this is the DIY range that is coming up very rapidly. So what Splosh did was, instead of buying new bottles filled with your cleaning detergent or liquid soap, customers purchase a one-off starter box, which basically has a range of simply designed bottles. And inside each bottle, there is a concentrated liquid and the customers can just add warm tap water to it and they can create their own cleaning products. And these bottles can be used repeatedly, of course, with refill sachets being delivered to them as a subscription model. Another example from a startup called Mink is a 3D printer for makeup. So it can take any image and instantly transform into a wearable cosmetic. And what is happening here? We are relocalizing production. So you can produce at home or a nearby store. You can really save on the transportation cost. We all know that 3D printing actually vastly reduces the waste in the production method. And the adaptive process actually builds items layer by layer rather than subtracting a material from a larger piece and then building it. So there's a huge amount of savings in terms of the waste. And this is a very interesting example that has now come up, which is being applied to other industries as well. There is an interesting startup called Fluto. And what they do is they observe that heavy machinery is idle 50% of the time. And when it's not in use, it's not earning money. So how can you earn for it? So Flu basically just connects idle machines to willing users. So sort of an eBay for customers who really want to use a heavy machinery for a short period of time and they don't want to buy the machinery, they just want to use the service. And a lot of these gig economy and platform economy models are coming up in the digital world, where a lot of these marketplaces are coming, which are connecting buyers and sellers, which is also enabling a circular economy in a way. We spoke about Renault earlier when I was mentioning about how automobile industry can actually reduce a lot of their cost and also a lot of the waste that they generate in a normal situation. So we are talking about circular vehicles already. Renault is a great example. The company has a recycling scheme where they are basically extracting materials like copper, steel, even the textile and plastic from the end of life vehicles, and they're putting this into new vehicles. So currently, roughly 36% of the total mass of a newly produced vehicle in Europe is made of recycled materials. And what they're now doing, they're going a step further. They are remanufacturing engines. So components, engine components and gearboxes in their factory in France, which they've started doing. Another example, of course, like I said, is car2go, which is like convenience of a car without any associated costs, simply like our bike sharing models. there is no depreciation, and it's quick and convenient. We are also seeing a lot of electric vehicles being coming up, and you can use an app to book them. You can, find it and then hop on your journey. Now, speaking about all these examples and, opportunities, it is also important to touch upon challenges in embedding CE. So, it is obviously not that easy. There are certain challenges that come with it. There are certain, effects like leakages. There is energy wastage. What we see practically is there are infrastructure gaps. So, for instance, reverse logistics still not set up, not having the machinery or R&D in place. There is a skilling gap as well. So there are certain challenges, of course, which can be overcome, but just to cite that. And one of the main challenges that we see here, which requires a completely different session altogether, is plastic. So we do see, our relationship with plastic needs a lot of rethinking. We know that, we have around 8 million tons and more than that actually leaking into the ocean every year. And that number is rising. So the usage of plastic, if we see in the past 50 years, it has increased, 20-fold. And, if you really speak about recycling, very little amount is able to be collected or recycled. 95% of the value of plastic packaging material, there was a study that said, which is worth 80 to 120 billion USD, is lost annually just because of this leakage point. And what can we do about it? There are certain methods. There is a whole charter prepared by Ellen MacArthur Foundation that you can read, which is basically really urging about, the need to really move beyond recycling. So while improving recycling is crucial, we cannot recycle our way out of this issue. And we need more reuse models, which really provide economically viable opportunity. And we need better and alternate materials. So there is this charter, which you can see, a 6-point charter you can access and read more about it. It speaks about, elimination of unnecessary plastic packaging that we see these days, coming up with reuse models. Very recently, a couple of months back, Unilever started, launching here in India refill stations, where these are these mobile kiosks where you can actually go and take your own containers and fill the products that you would typically buy in those horrible single-use plastics. Then, there are also examples where startups and entrepreneurs are coming up with alternates to plastic packaging as well. I'll show you one example very quickly. So this is the reuse model that they are kind of propagating. And of course, it's not all that gloomy. If we see the kind of innovations that are coming up, it's excellent, and the future can be plastic free. At least that's my hope. So on the left side, you see Uho, which is basically an edible and biodegradable packaging for beverages and condiments. It is basically made from brown seaweed, which is of course a renewable natural resource. And this was basically trialed in London in 2019 in the London Marathon. These were the water capsules that were given to the runners. And this single trial actually eliminated the need for more than 30,000 single-use plastic cups and bottles, which were usually handed over to those marathon runners, which is excellent. So this company is now, innovating and trying to see what kind of other packaging and food packaging they can get into. On the right side, you see, these plastic-free packaging that is coming up in these new age stores. One is Lush, which is basically, it has 850 stores worldwide, and it sells a wide range of these solid products without, those horrible plastic packaging. So there are these kind of exclusive stores that are coming in, which are really reducing the need of really supplying you something wrapped in that bubble wrap or a plastic. And of course, there are lots of other examples as well, which I would like to share with you. But I would now like to take a pause and, of course, take in questions as well. And if we have time, maybe, discuss, how do you see circular economy? If you were to kind of redesign something, what would be that product? Or what do you see something as an opportunity for innovating? Other than that, I would like to thank you all for your patience and would really like to have an interaction now. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Rozita. Very, very informative, very rapid walkthrough of all things circular economy. So yeah, thank you very much. So folks, please feel free to put any questions you have or comments in the chat. or if you really want to speak out loud as well, please feel free to raise your hand in Zoom and we'll come to you. Whilst you're thinking or typing your questions, I had a few that came to mind as we went through. So I wanted to, well, first of all, just remind folks or let people know that actually next Monday we have our first mentor meetup, and the topic will be circular economy. Rozita won't be there, but there'll be 3 other mentors who are familiar with circular economy concepts. So if this is like really getting your brain firing on all cylinders and you're interested, or you just want to kind of meet some of the mentors and see what they're up to, then come along on Monday at the same time as this, 8 a.m. Pacific. And that's the first of 6 mentor meetups. So just an FYI on that. One of my questions for you, Rozita, was that you mentioned near the start, or at the start, that the fraction of the global economy that is currently circular is small, around 8%, and it was in decline. So how do you see the circular economy concept expanding in the next couple of years, and how far can the circular economy go in time for our kind of 2030 or 2050 global climate decarbonization targets? What's the scope and what's the trend?
Right. So, Liam, actually, one word I would say, disruption is needed in a big sense. And disruption, not only I'm speaking about usually typically spoken in the innovation or startup world, but also disruption in the kind of way we govern our cities or way we regulate our policies. For instance, European Union has this very excellent, kind of directive on circular economy, which they started more than a decade back. And if you really see how it trickled down, to give you an example of Amsterdam city, the municipality has set very ambitious and very solid targets for 2030, 2040, 2050 on how to make the city more circular. This means that it's not only the Amsterdam municipality that will be working, the neighborhoods and civil society groups have been activated. We see a lot of academic and research institutions coming in. There's a whole circular neighborhood that they're developing together called Boykslotterham, which is also a very great case study. And similarly, then we see the Unilever and Philips and the other companies residing in Netherlands as their headquarters, and they have started to produce various targets. To give you an example, the company where I was in Philips, in 2016, they said that 15% of our revenue will come from circular products and services. Now, at that time, it was a big news, a big deal. And, everybody was like, how will that happen? Like, how will we quickly, adjust or, make our systems ready? But that did happen. They did achieve the target in 2020. And that did require, of course, a lot of investment in R&D, a lot of new thinking, but also just activating a lot of this knowledge that already exists. But sometimes we need that North Star to go towards it. So it was a little bit top down because the CEO outlined this target and then everybody had to act. On the other hand, we saw bottom-up initiatives where, civil society organizations started coming up. People started demanding, repairability. If you really speak about repairability culture and the regime that we are seeing, it's a result of the whole conscious consumerism culture. So I also feel, because sometimes we focus a lot on government, but it's also our responsibility. So it's a little bit of a mixture of hitting the, target with all the points. I have seen how regulations can help, so I will not undermine that. In India itself, a couple of years back, we got the extended producer responsibility rule, which is basically, the big manufacturers and producers, polluters, they really need to take back some of the products that they're putting out, and they need to look at recycling. An example exists in UNDP, where we are now establishing material recovery centers. This is funded by Coca-Cola, which is usually known as a polluter. But because of this legislation, they have to get their EPR certificate, which means that they have to recover those plastic bottles back from the users, which means it gives the space to create more employment, because now we have these dry waste collection centers. And it has led to a very interesting movement, which was not existing because that stick wasn't there. And sometimes, of course, you need the carrot approach as well, where you need to incentivize businesses to be able to, meet the targets. So I think overall speaking, the world will become more circular. It has a great potential. But every stakeholder, multi-stakeholder, they need to come together and they need to really, whatever works for them, because for government and for private sector, they look at legislation. Ultimately, everybody is looking at profit. So till they not see profitable models, they will not invest in it. Because of this refurbishing and remanufacturing regime, suddenly the private sector got interested because they saw money in it, right? They saw a new profit stream coming in. So suddenly they were incentivized to kind of like work on it. So I think we need more examples and we need more economically viable examples, because all said and done, everybody is not motivated just by environment. We need to understand that money talks, money does work. So what I have realized in my own journey, which started with a little bit activist voice, but now working with different stakeholders, is that everybody is not motivated by environment. We need to walk the talk. We need to talk the same language as the stakeholders. So when we speak to businesses, we have to speak in that way. When we are speaking to the government, we have to speak in a strict legislative, regulatory, law and policy dialogue way. So I think that is where the key is. And the good part is that everybody has a role to play. Nobody can say it's just one stakeholder who needs to act.
Excellent. Thanks, Rozita. And I feel like you've actually managed to address a couple of the first questions in here, which and another of my questions, which is a bit about the policy sphere and some examples of that, which you've given, which are great. Adam was asking that, you mentioned the idea of the skills deficit in some of the processes involved. Could you give some examples of that and what might be being done to address that gap?
Right. So what I meant by that was that if you were to envision a circular business, for instance, right? Hypothetically, there is a circular business which is doing everything right. The kind of people they will employ and the kind of skill set they will need right now somehow does not exist, because we are used to the linear economy. So we are used to the capitalist world. We have those typical marketing, sales functions, right, in every company. But when you go further down, again, looking at the example of any manufacturing company, the person who's making your detergent bottles or the team that is really preparing all that, you need to go back to the design stage. So we say this, that in industries, there is now a interesting thing that is being introduced, which is circular design, which means at the R&D stage itself, there are teams that come in and they see that how can they make this product modular. For instance, even in Philips, we had this whole R&D department where the function of this whole, new team, circular design team, was how can we design for repairability? How can we have those control points in the product that we are putting out today? For instance, a coffee machine, where if something goes wrong in the coffee machine, can the customer get an alert through IoT-based sensors that this part is defective, and then the customer does not need to throw out their coffee machine. They just need to replace that part, and this can be bought from anywhere. Of course, the manufacturer would like that they buy it from them. So there is a win-win here. They are able to have that transaction. So from a transactional relation with the customer, where ka-ching, like the cash register go, and then you say goodbye and you don't see them again. This time you're actually seeing them again and again during the life period of that product. And that trust that comes in the customer with this kind of producer enables them to have more trust in the company, probably buy more products. So it does convert into sales, which is what they are looking at. But at our end, what we are looking at, we don't want people to buy coffee machines just for 1 year or 2 years and then throw it out. We want them to own it till it can really function to its optimal capacity. So these kind of skill set and these setting up these kind of teams is something that I observed was, obviously it is happening now, but it is not that easy. Of course, now we are seeing even in educational institutes, systems design thinking courses, design thinking courses are coming up. We did not used to speak about all of this more than a decade back. At least there was no access to a student to be able to really learn it. If we look at data science and the emerging kind of skill sets that are coming up with this whole new big data and data science kind of stream, that is also very helpful. So this idea about sensors that are giving IoT based sensors which are giving alerts to the customer actually came from a student who was interning in the department, right? And he was coming from industrial design engineering background. So this is what I mean, like in everywhere in our current regimes. So whatever your discipline might be, whether you're an engineer or an ecologist or like a journalist like me, in our educational, regimes, are we being introduced to these kind of skill sets as well? So that is where I think on a very micro and zoomed in level I showed you. On a zoomed out level, of course, it also means looking at the recyclers that are out there. Oftentimes what we face is we have all this material collected in our recovery center, but we don't find the market to sell it. There's nobody who can, make it into a good product. I was talking about the downstream and upstream industry interface. We find it sometimes difficult, and I'm saying this is a challenge we all are facing, that we are doing very good in collection. We are able to collect, sometimes we are able to segregate, but then in the end, it all gets mixed up just because we don't find those buyers for that clean and segregated waste who can do something with it and put something together. So this is where the startup and the entrepreneurship space is really helping. To be honest, there are now people who are coming up with, in the fashion industry, they're coming up with, there was an innovator who started using banana fiber in the clothes. This happened just a few months back, and it made a big news that how can banana fiber come in clothes, but he proved it. And now he's trying to see if, he can get into the mainstream. Similarly, there are these upcycled fashion products that are coming up, bags that can be made up of plastic, shoes that can be made up of plastic. I think Nike started that. Was it Nike or Adidas? I don't remember. They started using the, recycled stream of plastic into their shoes. So I think this is this very, kind of a new age, and we need more people who can think, out of the box in these areas.
Thanks, Rozita.
Yeah, it was Adidas. Thanks, Pooja.
Yeah, thanks, Pooja. Great. It's interesting. There's a couple of good questions in the chat here, and connects to one that I had as well. Let me see if I can put them together into something coherent. Because you talked earlier as well about the donut economy model, which is obviously as well quite a stark change, or let's say innovation from our existing classical economic system, which is like growth at all costs, and everything must, all businesses must grow or die, and that's the only way things work. And very much linked to that is the kind of highly consumerist society that we find ourselves in. So we're always talking about the purchase of products and more products and more, and we need more, and I'm going to buy that coffee machine because I need one, and then you actually realize you don't need one, but it still sits there on your in your kitchen for 10 years or whatever. So thinking about all of those things, and some of the questions like Alan was asking, how can we shift the people, the consumers, to think that they want the more circular economy or circular style products, and at the other end you've got the some of the big companies that are pushing back. Like Zain says, there's the right to repair movement, but big companies like Apple are always pushing back against that. How much in your work do you find yourself kind of stuck in this, or challenged by the fact that the economic system we work in isn't particularly well directed to some of the changes that we could all collectively agree are good, probably good things for us and for everyone, but not for the kind of the bottom line profit motive for everybody?
Right. This is a tough one, and it's quite a rant probably that I'm trying to avoid to get into, but just to attempting to answer that question. So two things. One is, first of all, for the donut economy, because you started with that, the announcement of the city, the first city who wanted to kind of really have this target, Amsterdam, came in during the pandemic. They said that we want to be regenerative and inclusive. This was their word that came in, because I think this term inclusive was ignored for a lot of years. And then we saw the impact of pandemic and the whole social fabric being affected, the importance of connections, the value of communities coming together to help each other. So this is where they began with. They did not say environment, they did not say circular, they said that we want to be regenerative and inclusive. They really understood the concept of regeneration, which I was mentioning earlier, which is very essence of circular economy. The second thing is definitely, yes, consumers the ambitions are really, rising. It's totally normal to be, kind of wanting a coffee machine or wanting a car or wanting certain material. But we have to understand, this regime has been, this whole thinking has happened since a number of decades, since the Industrial Revolution started. Only now we are beginning to see the alternatives. So my keyword here is alternative. Still, we don't provide that alternate in the same space where the competition is, where the mainstream folks is, people won't change. The announcement of Unilever coming up with those mobile kiosks that I mentioned, that happened in Mumbai city a couple of months back, that came after years of lobbying of so many people, so many civil society organizations who were after Unilever, that why do you come up with those horrible sachets? So if you know those, 1 rupee sachet that they supply mostly to developing countries because, affordability. So to really look at the lower strata, they supply one rupee sachet of shampoo and or God knows what all, and it's completely always ends up in landfill and blocking the drains. And whenever you argue with them, they always say that, oh, they are also one of our customers, and we are looking at the underserved market. But it's all BS, right? They want profit from it, and that's why they're doing it. Now, what has happened is there are certain startups that started coming up, and they started coming up with these new techniques and new stores without plastic packaging, alternate goods. I think something did happen there. Disruption from even the smaller fish can affect the bigger fish. And then now we see, after years of lobbying and after years of throwing data in their face, they are coming up with this very interesting initiative, which they should have done probably decades back. They could have, where they are accepting that we don't always want to sell those blue bottles of detergent each time to our consumer. They can actually retain the bottles. They can actually come and they can just refill, and we will take the cost, expense of putting those there. It shouldn't be charity. It shouldn't be an NGO doing it. It's actually the responsibility of me, because I'm the one who's putting that, those bottles in the market. And this is exactly the kind of movement we need to demand from all kinds of companies. So you are making huge profit from the sale of your, one-time products. You take a responsibility and step up to clean up the mess, right? So this is one example, but like I said, I mean, there's no easy way to answer this. There's always a tussle. There are always, shortcomings. There are still people who find loopholes in the regulations, and they still won't do what they have been told to do. We observe this on a day-to-day basis. And that's why to the government, we say, please be strong, come up with, really strong laws and implement them as well. Have that, stick in your hand. To the private sector, we say that you need to, really innovate. You need to come up with, better kind of ideas, and this will only help you because you will be getting the revenue stream. To the consumers, we say that your shopping bag can change the world. What you decide to buy and what you decide to not buy can actually change the world. Sometimes we think we are too small to make a difference, but trust me, there are consumers who are now gathering up, civil society organizations that are really mobilizing people on this conscious consumerism movement. And they see the change, because we have to understand the reason they give this to us is because we buy it. If we don't ask for alternates, if we do not question them back, they will continue supplying it, and the whole, their whole argument will be, people are buying it, so what are you saying? I can show you the volume of sales, I can show you the number. So we need to change this mentality of, oh, people are buying it, so we will make. No, people are not buying it. People will start saying no to your products. So this is a little bit ambitious, but I'm telling you, because this does work. I do believe in top-down things, but I do believe that bottom-up has a great power to change everything. We have a lot of startups that are now coming, and they are becoming game changers. Of course, many of them get acquired by the big fish. We see that after the startup becomes successful, but then there are some who really stay and they give competition. And there are people who are now changing their ways of thinking.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks, Rozita. So there's a couple more questions in the chat. I'm going to try and get to them in our last 4 minutes. I think Alison left quite a good question here, which was about Obviously, one of the most helpful things about the circular economy concept, apart from the reduction of waste, is the reduction of energy use and material use. So Alison was asking, are there specific sectors or products where moving towards the circular economy would have the largest impact on greenhouse gas emissions, for example? Or is there any other way of kind of thinking about prioritization? I mean, clearly all sectors should be trying to follow more towards the circular model, but are there any that stand out to you as sort of really like big game that needs our attention?
Yes. So definitely, like I said, textile industry has a huge role to play. Unfortunately, textile industry does contribute a lot to pollution. A lot of chemicals are used in the industry. A lot of synthetic products are used. And a lot of discarding also happens at the consumer cycle. So if we really see the consumer and the producer both, it becomes a huge game changer if we are able to address that. Other than that, we do see now really looking at these mass produced products. So we call them the FMCG companies. So the ones that I was telling you about, the mass consumer products, because just by the sheer volume of sales, it can have an impact. A small tweak like including recycled plastic instead of going for virgin plastic can have a huge impact, for instance. So no need to extract the virgin resources. To give you an example, again, from the company that I worked in, the whole target was that in our domestic appliances, so in our vacuum cleaners, in our cleaning products and other domestic appliances, instead of always using 100% virgin plastic, can we start playing with the volumes? Can we take back certain products? People can actually, manufacturers can now buy these pellets, plastic pellets and recycled pellets of all colors, and they can use it in their manufacturing industry. So currently the domestic appliances use 30 to 40% of recycled plastic. Now that's a small step, but if you look at the volume game and the size of the market and the number of sales they have, it does make a difference. On the other hand, we need to also move a little bit away from just talking about recycling, because I think that's what we always end up talking about. But when we look at the world figure of how much is recycled, it's really bad. It's a single-digit figure. So what we now need to talk about is upcycling, right? So it's not about, at the consumer end, we need to speak about reducing and reusing for sure. I think we need to go back to the basics. It's fine to have an aspiration, but the game changer is really reducing the need itself and really reusing. So we need to make all these secondhand markets cool again. In certain cultures, these markets are definitely cool. In certain cultures, these are looked upon that, oh, I will not use a product used by someone else so many times. How do I know it's hygienic or not? So it is a challenge for sure. We see that the secondhand markets work well for something like furniture, for instance, which somebody might want to save on, right? But it might not be the same for some other industry like appliances, which is tough to maintain and upkeep over a long period of time. So again, there's a lot of nuances that need to be looked upon before recommending. But coming to upcycling, it is a big game changer. According to me, I also urge here, everywhere, wherever I go and talk within my own organization and to the government, that we need to really stop glorifying recycling so much. Because many a times for many metals, we see that just second or third time when you recycle, so the number of times, right, where you can really use it, there's such a loss of energy and the loss of that labor cost that went into it. So that embodied energy or embodied cost that we say, that it's really futile sometimes just to take on stuff and keep on recycling it. What we need to now look at is the linkages, like I was talking about. Can one industry's waste be somebody's resource? There was a very interesting, anecdote from someone from Teradu cohort, I think from the last batch, who was working in the fashion industry. And he was telling me his trauma of selling circular economy in the fashion industry, especially due to the pandemic, because everybody's sales is down. So everybody's like, don't talk to me about that. I need my profit. He started playing a little bit with the communication. So he went to this, huge supplier of a cloth manufacturer who was making these zips and, buttons on these pants and shirts. And there was a lot of waste, if you see, that comes out of tailoring after you make the product. And that waste he was just throwing it out. This person went to him and showed him the value of that waste. So he said that this piece that you just threw out, actually, this is being sold by someone outside for 10 rupees. So he's actually taking your waste and he's actually creating a good business. As soon as he realized that somebody's earning from my waste, that businessman came into action and he was like, oh no way. So he started relooking at his, way of working, the labor. He started training them better, and he started selling those things that he found valuable to another industry or another player. So this kind of thing where one industry's waste is actually another's resource. And I think if we were to map, it will be an interesting exercise. We will find so many examples. For instance, Adidas. Do you think they would have spent so much in manufacturing that shoe that they're selling now as the plastic recycled one for a very great price, but you feel good because you're doing good for the planet? They're earning really well from it, but the material that they use is they're paying really less for that material because they don't have to pay that high price for a better material or original virgin plastic. They don't have to go through that price volatility. They can easily collect it. Like I said, these kind of plastic pellets are now very readily available. There are a lot of recyclers and collectors who provide this. So they are saving a lot on their cost, and they're selling that shoe at a high markup in the name of course, feeling good as a consumer to be a sustainable, brand conscious one, which is not bad because this is their carrot, right? But what we learn from this is that the kind of material currently our products are using, there is definitely a better alternate to it. But it's just that nobody is exploring that alternate. Or it's just a given that since decades we are using this. This is the cost price, unit price. This is our selling price, assembly line. Give it away, right? So this is a linear take, make, waste model, exactly. We need to question that. We need to make it a circle, not a linear loop. That can you take something from there or can you take something from there and then include it? And this way you will be saving the cost. So you need to give those brownie points or plus points to every stakeholder. I think the role of this behavioral change communication is really a great deal in the coming times. The way you speak about this to the person who's actually going to act is a game changer. For instance, this example which I was giving you about this tailor from the fashion industry, if you just go with them with a sermon that, oh, the world is 8.6% circular, what are you doing? He will throw you out. He will not listen to your scientific facts. You need to speak in the language which he understands, which was money in this case. You need to really provide the carrot wherever it's possible and really not forget the stick as well. Because yes, legislations and laws and better policies and better governance does help. Because there are so many people just taking advantage of the absence of that. We saw that in many countries. So yeah, that's my long rant. Sorry for such long, answers, and hopefully they're helpful. And I'm happy to answer others as well over email and share more examples.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Rozita, and thanks everyone. There's some good links being shared in the chat there as well. Very enjoyable getting to know more about your work and your responses. So thanks very much. I'm conscious that we're a few minutes over time, so I'm going to call it there and say just thanks again to everyone for coming, and especially to Rozita for speaking to us today. And if anyone feels like their questions didn't get answered, then please feel free to send them to me and I can pass them on to Rozita. Thanks for that offer, Rozita.
Yes, I will answer all the questions that I couldn't touch upon today. And thanks to everyone for being patient and listening to me.
Thanks very much all. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.